Hey, so I thought I would chime in and do the Idiom Delirium book tag. This was started by KD Books, so if you don't know who he is, go and watch his channel. So number one, a closed book, a book you've never had any desire to buy. Um, Let me see. I've got pictures on my iPod because I can't be bothered to edit this afterwards and put pictures in. I don't know how you put them like this. Um, but I don't really want to keep having to skip over new footage because I'm lazy. So I would have to say Bad News by Edward St. Auburn. I read the first book in this trilogy, which was Nevermind, and I found a particular passage of, I don't know, let's just say incest slash child molestation, just really, I don't want to say badly done. Was it badly done? I don't know, but it just disturbed me for weeks afterwards, and it just seemed to come out of nowhere. And I thought, fuck this book after I read it. So I don't know if maybe Bad News is any better. Some parts of the book I found really funny, but with like material just that serious, I just find it really, really jarring. And sinister. And I think it was meant to be sinister, but for me, I was like, whoa, this is way too much. And I have a really black sense of humour, so I find it really, really jarring. But I think it was meant to be disturbing, but it just disturbed me for weeks afterwards, the way it was written. So if Bad News is anything like Nevermind, do not want to read any more of that trilogy. Right, next tag. 2, an open book. Book you want to read but don't have yet. And I would have to say Rendang by Will Harris. This is a poetry collection that's recently come out by Granta Poetry. And Granta Poetry is a new kind of, I don't know, segue from Granta. So they recently started a poetry, like an actual poetry editing part of the magazine. While the publishers. So instead of it just being like one or two poems, they actually have a whole section now for poetry. So I believe Rendang by Will Harris is one of the first collections to profit from that new segue of Granta. So I really want to check that out because I've heard wonderful, wonderful things about it. Okay, next. In My Good Books. Which book do you wish had more recognition? And I would have to say Opposed Positions by Gwendolyn Riley. Now, she's a favourite author of mine, and this cover, they did kind of screw her over with this cover because who would want to read this book based on this cover? It looks like an advert for, it looks like an NHS advert for like depression or domestic abuse. And I'm not going to lie, the book is kind of sad, but let me take this off because this isn't doing the book any favours. This is one of my favourite books of hers. And when this came out, didn't get on any prize lists, didn't get anything. This was a fourth novel. This came out in 2012. And it came out after the recession, the 2008 recession. So in this book, it's told by Aislinn, and she's a struggling writer, and she's literally living on pennies. And she's is she just hitting 30? And she's like hitting a threshold in her life where she's like, this writing stuff isn't working out. What the hell am I going to do with my life? And it's kind of the narrator Aislinn has a really kind of flat tone to her. So it's flat, but it's mysterious. And I think Gwendolyn Riley does a really good job of just creating a really emotional atmosphere without hitting you over the head with it. And it's not a mystery novel, and Gwendolyn Riley's novels aren't really plot focused, so it's just Aislinn kind of just going round her life, examining relationships and kind of her family history and being like, how did I end up here? But yes, I love this book, and I think it should get more recognition. When it came out, it only got a shout out from Anne Enright in a Guardian article. It was a really favourable article. I'll link that down below if you want to read more about it, because Anne Enright is much more eloquent than I could be about this book. Okay, next. Off the books. Recommend something non-book related. And for this, I would have to say that lately I have been enjoying... Let me get my iPod back up. Nordic Berries Cider from Aldi. This is kind of like black currant squash, but fizzy and with a bit more of a tang to it. So if you like sweet ciders, but it's not way too sweet, and the bottle is just the right size where it's not too sickly and it's not just enough that you're still left thirsty. So Nordic Berry Cider, if that's up your alley, I would recommend that. Okay, next. Never judge a book by its cover. But this time you can. Which book has a horrific cover? And for this, I would have to say the Faber 50th Anniversary edition of the Bell Jar. So, I mean, you might think, oh, this looks okay, but I think the red and green is really, really gauche. And I just think this whole, woman staring at her makeup mirror, she's not even looking pensive. She just looks like she's just doing her makeup. And it's the exact, model of feminine mystique that the whole book is arguing against and criticising. So I don't like this cover. I mean, maybe if they just had a crack in the mirror, that would have just been okay. But this and the 50th anniversary, Faber, you did the most on that edition. But I mean, I have another edition that I like now, but that was the original edition I picked up of the Bell Jar. And after I read it, I was like, what the fuck? But I have a nice edition now, so it's all okay. Right, next. 6. Every trick in the book. Which book was an intangible mess? And for this one, I would have to say The Devil Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger. Now, I love the movie. The movie is one of my favourite movies. It's just such a fun movie. And I love all the, the clothes in it and all that. I just think it's lush. But the book is an absolute mess. It was her first novel. And I believe she was Anna Wintour's editor. Not editor, but her personal assistant or something at Vogue. So she wrote the novel afterwards. And I thought, oh my God, I think Miranda Priestley in the film, she kind of has Anna Wintour teas, but it's not Anna Wintour. She's her own character and she's brilliant. So in the novel, I thought, maybe it would be spilling even more tea on what it's like to work for Anna Wintour. But, I mean, obviously it's fiction, but I just thought there'd be a bit more juicy stuff in it. But I only read 30 pages and then just chucked it in one of those Red Cross book bins because I was like, this is terribly written. Just from the off, I was like, the character setup is really bad. Yeah. So she just moves to New York in it and... I think around page 20, she was just describing every single thing in her new room. But it wasn't even like she was describing fashionable items or fashionable items she wants. It wasn't anything like that. She was just describing random things in her room. And the author, she had an author's note at the front that said, blame my editor for cutting out all the funny bits. And I was like, fuck. Because this book was about 400 pages. And already I could just tell that it was atrociously written and... didn't know what it was doing. And I thought if the editor cut that down and it was still listing all this random shit in the room that no one cares about, I was like, Jesus, that editor even got fed up with it. And for her to be criticising the editor, she should be thanking the editor for championing the book and getting it published, because that ended up with the film being made. So I'm grateful for the film, but the book, god awful. Right, next. 7. Hit the books. A favourite book you studied at university and the worst book you did at university. So I will, the last two have been a bit negative, so I will say the worst book, in my opinion, that I did at uni, which was The Way of the World by William Congreve. It's meant to be a comedy, but I just find it really, really boring. I did that for an 18th century course on satire, so maybe that I was all satire by that point, even though I love satire. But yeah, I find that particularly boring, that book, and nothing stayed with me. But it is a play, so maybe if I reread it, I'd find something salvageable in it, but personally didn't like it. Right, and my favourite book I did at uni. I have loads of favourite books I did at uni, but I would have to say the one that stands out to me would have to be The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. It's not one of his most well-known books, but when it came out, it was banned. I think he wrote it during the First World War. I think, pretty sure. But I love this. It's like a family saga, kind of, but it's like a British one, not a Russian one. So it follows 3 generations. Yeah, it was written in 1915, and then it was banned worldwide because it was grossly indecent. And it follows 3 generations called the Brangwens, and is it set near Nottingham? I think it's set around there because that's where D.H. Lawrence was from. But it follows them just dealing with all the changes that were going on in the Industrial Revolution. And I believe the father's a miner at the start. I think so. And then it follows the different generations and how they go about. But it's not just, white British people, because there are some immigrants in it. I believe Tom Brangwen at the start of it marries a Polish immigrant, I think. And then the family kind of spiral off from there. So it's really, really interesting, really, really ahead of its time. And it is a bit of a slow burn. So you have to take it slow, I think. But it's really worth it. Some of the writing is stunning in it. There's a beautiful scene where there's this massive flood that just kills loads of things. And in the last generation, there's this character called Ursula who... I don't know if she's a lesbian or bisexual, but she has this like fling with... is it her teacher at school? And there's like a scene where they're like having a bath together and, swimming in a pond together. It's really, really good, and I can see why it was banned. But yeah, it's really good. And there's a particular scene where Ursula's teaching. I'm pretty sure it's in this book, not another one of D.H. Lawrence's, but there's a scene where Ursula is teaching and she just reaches this crisis point where all the kids are just acting up for her, and she just breaks. She just snaps and gets them all in line. And I think, having done supply teaching, I can relate to that. So yeah, I love The Rainbow, and at the time when I read it, I just really enjoyed it. I read it for a modernism course, but it's not like highly modernist aesthetic, even though D.H. Lawrence's writing is very aestheticized, but it's really lyrical. So yeah, would really recommend The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. If you've not read any D.H. Lawrence, would this be a good place to start? Sons and Lovers is probably a good place to start because that's more autobiographical. So yeah, if you've not read D.H. Lawrence, I would say start with Sons and Lovers, and if you like Sons of Lovers, you'll like The Rainbow. But yeah, if you like Thomas Hardy, you probably like The Rainbow as well. And next, 8 bookworms. Tag someone who reviewed a book that you really want to read. So I am tagging Coiny Reads, and she reviewed, she did like a whole review of the Wolf Hall trilogy, and I recently read Wolf Hall, loved it, but I don't have Bring Up the Bodies or The Mirror and the Light. And so when she was talking about Bring Up the Bodies, I was like, this sounds insanely good. I want it. So, yeah, tag in Coiny Reads and want to read Bring Up the Bodies. So thank you, KD Books, for developing this tag. I'll be back soon.